welcome to the first lecture of Econ 2302, Principles of Microeconomics. This lecture will go over Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. Chapter 1, we talk about what economics is, and in Chapter 2, we actually look at some key concepts that we will use throughout the entirety of this course. So let's start off with what the definition of economics is. Most people will say that economics is just the study of money. Now, while the study of money does fall under the realm of economics, it's much more than just the study of money. It's actually the study of choices, and more specifically, the study of choices when there is scarcity. There are two types of economics that we study in a broad sense. First is macroeconomics, which is the study of choices by governments and nations. And then there's microeconomics, which is what this class is. And that is the study of choices by individuals and firms. And firms is just a fancy way of saying businesses. And that is what we will use in this course. So what is scarcity? Well, that's when resources we use to produce goods and services are limited. For instance, I would love to have as many iPads as I can, even though I probably wouldn't be able to use them and I don't really need them. Why not? I would love to have as much gasoline as possible and never have any wants, because all my wants would be met. However, that's not possible because A, there is a finite amount of iPads available in the world, gasoline in the world, and B, secondly, I don't have the money to purchase those goods, let alone the need. So economics is the study of choices when there's scarcity. It's the choice of one good over the other, or using our time to produce goods and services over something else. This is just a quote from Thomas Sowell, one of my favorite economists. He's actually a very funny economist. The first lesson of economics is that there is scarcity. There's never enough of anything to fully satisfy all those who want it. The first lesson of politics is to disregard the first lesson of economics. In other words, politicians are going to tell you what you want to hear. Economists are probably going to tell you what you don't want to hear. For instance, gas prices are probably going to go up whenever there's a storm. Or, I can guarantee jobs. No politician can guarantee jobs. Economists are probably going to say, I can guarantee you that the market might rebound. Doesn't mean that there will be more jobs. We may just be efficient and not need more jobs. Alright, so let's look at the factors of production. If economics is a study of choices on what we produce and how much we produce, then we need to look at production itself. And there are 5 specific factors of production. And you will need to know these for the exam, the first exam. The first one's natural resources. That's pretty self-explanatory. These are resources provided by nature and used to produce goods and services. Things like oil in its natural state, water, land, things like that, crops. Secondly is labor. That's a human effort. This is the actual physical effort and the mental effort used to produce goods and services. So think of it like this. You producing something, the ability to produce it is one thing, but actually producing it, that's labor. And typically you get wages for labor. If I become an engineer, the ability to design something, once I actually design it, that's when labor comes in. The knowledge, not necessarily, and we'll look at that in just a second. Thirdly is physical capital. This is a stock of equipment, machines, structures, and infrastructure that is used to produce goods and services. Physical capital is the things that are not man-made, but they stock, they pile up, and you can touch them. They're tangible things, such as a restaurant, or a building, or a tractor, something like that. Whereas the crops or livestock would be natural resources, the tractor itself would be physical capital. Fourth is human capital. Now this is what I referred to just a second ago. This is knowledge and skills acquired by a worker through education and experience that are used to produce goods and services. Now it's not the actual effort, it's just the ability to do it. For instance, to teach economics, I had to get a master's degree in economics. That doesn't mean that I in teaching economics. It just means I have the knowledge to do that. Once I put it into practice, it becomes labor. As I teach, I gain more human capital, and I learn how to do things much better. Everybody has human capital, and they're always gaining it. You know, one of the neatest things I've witnessed is someone at the minimum wage level that has very little skills. At least we would assume they have a very limited skill set, and their ability to adapt and gain human capital on the job is just astounding because it makes their life so much better. Think of it this way. If you were to go into a fast food restaurant and you see a worker behind the counter and it's their first day, they're probably very slow at taking your order, running the cash register, trying to figure out what buttons to push, and customers get very irate. They don't get off on time, things like that. Well, as they become better and do the job over and over, they gain more human capital and learn how to do it better. And it's in their advantage. They don't want to stay late. They don't want to make customers irate. It makes them uncomfortable. So someone, even with a very limited skill set, they can still gain that knowledge. Fifth, and it might be one of the most important factor of production, oftentimes we overlook it, is entrepreneurship. And in this class, microeconomics, we'll look at it a lot. It's the effort used to coordinate the factors of production, labor, natural resources, physical capital, human capital, to actually come up with the idea and put it together and coordinate it, to form a new design, invent something new and put it together, line up the natural resources with the labor and the physical capital and your own human capital, to invent Facebook, to invent Microsoft, to invent everything from stuff you drink to this computer that you're using. Alright, let's go away from production and into something else that we use in economics a lot. And that's how we analyze things. There are two types of analysis in economics, and you'll need to know this for the exam as well. The first is positive analysis, and that answers the question what is or what will be. It's a fact. That's what I want you to think of it as. Just something that is true. It's nonfiction. In other words, it is provable. It's definitive. For instance, this class is microeconomics. That's not an opinion. It's just a true fact. The study of individuals in the firm. That is microeconomics. That is a positive statement. The Denver Broncos are an NFL team. That's a positive statement. A normative statement or normative analysis answers what should be, what ought to be, what should happen. It's actually an opinion. The Denver Broncos are the greatest team to ever play in the NFL. That's my opinion. That's a normative statement. The Healthcare Act is not a good act and will be very detrimental to small businesses. That's a normative statement. Now, if I back it up with positive facts, it might become positive analysis. But an opinion in and of itself is just normative analysis. Here are some examples I encourage you to go through. I also encourage you to make up your own statements. Pretty simple. I rarely will look at these questions. I will probably put more of the actual statement in the exam, but it's pretty self-explanatory. One's opinion and one is a fact. I do want to add one thing really quickly. A lot of students have trouble with the positive analysis, thinking that it has to be happy. It doesn't. It's just a fact. I could say that the unemployment is really high. It is above 7%. Right now, I think it's almost below 6%. Depending on when you hear this, it might vary. But that's an abnormally high unemployment rate. A lot of people are unemployed. That's not a happy thing. That's just a positive statement. We lost millions of jobs in the Great Recession. Positive statement. Not a happy statement. It's just a fact. All right. A few terms used in economics. Economic model. It's just a simple representation of an economic environment, usually a graph. We're going to learn a graph soon in this class that we will use, the supply and demand curve. You don't really need to pay a whole lot of attention to the term economic model. Just know that we use a lot of graphs in this course. Next is ceteris paribus. You do need to know this. Ceteris paribus. Ceteris paribus is one of my favorite terms. I use it often. It's a Latin expression meaning that everything else is fixed. It's held constant. Why would we want to do that? Well, the only way for us to see if there was a change is only change one thing. If we're doing an experiment, whether it be a science experiment or any other type of experiment, economics experiment, if we want to see the change resulting from that, we need to change only one thing and hold everything else fixed. For instance, what would happen if you didn't set your alarm and you missed school, and when you missed school, you missed an exam, and therefore you failed that exam? What if that day, one other thing that you did completely different was that you called a friend during that day? You never called this friend, but you called that friend. Because you did that differently, if we were to just run a simple equation, simple experiment, the math would say that it could either be the fact that you didn't set your alarm or the fact that you called a friend that you failed that exam. Well, common sense would say that it's because you didn't set your alarm, right? Well, ceteris paribus says everything else needs to be held fixed. A marginal change, we'll use this also quite frequently in this class. Marginal change is just a small unit, a small change, 1 unit change in the value. We'll often say a marginal increase of this, a marginal decrease of this results in what? It's a marginal change, very small. Think of it this way. If you were to buy one shirt and it made you a certain amount of happy, we will look into that, don't worry. And you bought another shirt and it made you even more happy, we would look and measure how much more your satisfaction or happiness, by the way, that's called utility, we will learn about that, and that would be the margin, the marginal change. Oh, what do you know? Utility is the next slide. I knew it was coming up. Rational people respond to incentives. You must know that. Rational people respond to incentives. If I give you more money to do something, you're going to respond and work harder, etc., etc. Rational people always act in their own self-interest. It makes sense. We're always selfish. A lot of people who take my class, they hate that. But it's true. We're always acting selfishly. Now, our selfishness may appear in different ways. For instance, what if I help out an elderly lady across the street? The happiness I get is my own self-interest. So that's how we would measure that. And that's called utility. Utility is just a satisfaction or happiness from a choice. We believe that individuals will always maximize their utility. You're always going to maximize that. You're not going to leave any room to have more utility or have a utility surplus because you always want to maximize it. You want to get as happy as possible. Those are the key terms for Chapter 1. We're going to quickly go into Chapter 2. The key principles of economics. First off is opportunity cost. This is a big one. This is what you sacrifice to get something. For instance, your opportunity cost of listening to this lecture might be sleep, it might be working, it might be lost wages. Your opportunity cost of going to school, it might be tuition paid, the money you paid for tuition, the job you could have, sleeping, hanging out with friends, partying, doing who knows what kind of debauchery. The opportunity cost is something you sacrifice to get something else. And every choice you have has an opportunity cost. The opportunity cost of me giving this lecture right now is watching Netflix. Here's a good example. The cost of college. The opportunity cost spent on books. So you spend $40,000 of your money plus the opportunity cost of 4 years of working at $20,000 a year. So your total opportunity cost of going to college is $120,000. Now, the reason why you make that choice is because the value you get is greater than the opportunity cost, greater than what you sacrifice. If it wasn't, then you would choose the other choice because of the utility it brings you. All right, the production possibilities curve. This is a curve that shows possible combinations that an economy can produce. We're not going to look at this very closely because this is more of a macro term, but it kind of shows you that on this curve, if we were to produce 2 items, we could produce a lot of steel or a lot of wheat, and depending on where we're at on that curve, we're going to give up one or the other. For instance, when we produce 700 tons of steel, we only produce 10 tons of wheat. However, if we were to produce 70 tons of wheat, we only produce 120 tons of steel. That just kind of shows you illustratively what opportunity cost is. Kind of gives you a visual illustration to kind of look at it in your mind and be able to conceptualize the terminology of opportunity cost. Alright, remember how we talked about margin in the first chapter? We're going to bring up our first principle. I think the opportunity cost is actually a principle, but this is a big one. This is our big first principle in this course, the marginal principle. There are 2 things that we look at constantly in microeconomics. It's marginal benefit and marginal cost. Marginal benefit is the additional benefit. Remember, margin was 1 additional. Marginal benefit is the additional benefit resulting from a small increase in some activity. So it's the benefit I get from doing one thing. The benefit I get from recording 1 extra lecture. Then I don't have to record another one. I've already got it done. Or marginal benefit of me taking the trash out means that I've got it done, right? The cost is the additional cost resulting from a small increase in some activity. The cost of me taking the trash out is foregoing the pleasure from Netflix or something like that. If we were to apply this to business or firm principles, or using it in the firm, we would say the benefit from producing 1 more taco, if we sold tacos, or if we sold, I don't know, you name it. I'll stick with tacos. If we were to produce 1 more taco, how much more revenue would we get? How much more profit would we get? That's our marginal benefit. If it cost us too much to produce that 1 more or 1 additional taco, that's our marginal cost. And the marginal principle is that we will keep producing. We're going to keep choosing that certain activity that gives us the most benefit as long as marginal benefit is greater than marginal cost. If we get more money from producing it than it costs, we're going to keep doing it. However, if it gets to a certain point that it costs too much, then we're not going to keep producing. We're going to stop. And we try to get to the point where we hit an equilibrium where marginal benefit equals marginal cost. That's what we're going to choose in our firm or in our business. We want to be as satisfied as possible and not leave any room for extra profit. Here's the principle of voluntary exchange. This is also another big one. This states that the exchange between 2 people, if it's voluntary, makes both people better off. Think of it that way. If I choose to do something, if I choose to buy a shirt from you or a taco from you, I'm better off because I have a shirt or a taco that gives me utility, satisfaction, happiness, makes me cool, whatnot. You can argue whether Mr. Kemper is cool or not. However, that new taco gives me happiness. What do you get in turn? You get money. You're excited. We're both better off. Now, I'm losing money. Yeah, that's true. But I'm gaining the utility, the happiness from that shirt. And I wouldn't do it if it didn't give me something that would make me better off. Because it's voluntary. Remember? If I choose to work, I'm giving up my time, but the exchange is I get money. If you voluntarily exchange money for a college education, you must expect you'll be better off with it, right? In other words, that means that the principle of voluntary exchange holds true for every decision as long as you volunteer for it. If you were forced to work, you're not going to be as happy, you're not going to be as productive, and you probably would rather do something else. Adam Smith, who is the father of modern economics, you need to know that for the exam as well. He also wrote The Wealth of the Nations, one of my heroes. He stressed the importance of voluntary exchange in market economy. He said the propensity in human nature to truck, barter, and exchange one thing for another, it is common to all men and to find it in no other animals. Nobody ever saw a dog exchange with another dog. What he's getting at there is that as human beings, we actually trade with one another. And by trading, we're so much better off. And this is the foundation for exchange and markets, and more specifically, capitalism. All right. Another principle you need to know for this first exam is the real versus nominal principle. The nominal value of money is the face value. It's just what it states. So if I have $10, then the nominal value is $10. The real value of money is actually its purchasing power. And you need to remember that. I will say it throughout the semester. It's a purchasing power. It's the ability to buy things. If I have $10, but things are not worth what they're stated, and I have a hyperinflated currency, that's not really worth $10. For instance, a lot of people say that we should just raise the minimum wage, and that would cure a lot of the problems in the economy. That doesn't work like that. Prices might rise on other things, and therefore we would see a sum zero game, which just means that the benefit would zero out from the cost. There's a country that tried to do this. They gave everybody $1 trillion in their country, and that's Zimbabwe. Everybody got $1 trillion. The next thing that happened was gasoline would cost $500 million a gallon. Milk was $100 to $200 billion. No offense, but you don't feel like a trillionaire or a billionaire or even a millionaire if gasoline is that expensive. It doesn't really matter, right? So that's the real versus nominal. What we are concerned about in finance and economics is the real value. Many people focus on the nominal value. Another good example, which I really love to use in this class because we can relate to it. What if you were getting paid, I don't know, $40,000 a year to live in Lubbock, Texas, $45,000 a year. Not bad, right? Without a college education. Not bad at all. It's not that expensive to live in Lubbock, West Texas, South Plains. What if you moved to Houston and you still got paid $40,000? It would cost a lot more. Your rent would probably double. The amount of travel to get to work would triple. Gasoline bills would probably be, I don't know, $400 or $500 a month. What if you moved to New York City, where your rent would probably be $2,000 to $3,000 a month? $45,000 a year doesn't seem as much. That's why a lot of other states, they get paid more, but the nominal value is not what we're concerned about, because they pay so much more in their cost of living that the real value is about the same as living in West Texas. Those are the terms for Chapter 2. I know there aren't very many, but please go through the principles. They are very vital. We will cover them and refer to them often throughout the course. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. My email address is jkemper@southplainscollege.edu. You can also follow me on Twitter @Mr. Kemper.